Guys, we've got another major update regarding the current status of the Pac-12, and basically what we're hearing is the Pac-12 is on the verge of going bankrupt. Okay, guys, and we're going to get into all of it. What's going on with the negotiations between ESPN and the Pac-12? We heard a few days ago the Pac-12 is expected to lose both Colorado and Arizona at the very least when that happens in early August, and they're supposed to be invited to the Big 12. At that point, the Pac-12 is looking at adding San Diego State and maybe Fresno State or SMU. But guys, we've got a tidbit here of info. This is yesterday regarding the Pac-12 negotiations with ESPN. Looks like unless ESPN ups their offer, then the Pac will refuse the ESPN offer for the entire media package and go to market. So the ESPN, I'm guessing, is completely lowballing the Pac-12. I don't blame them at all. The Pac-12 is not an attractive entity at this point. The only two programs they've got that relatively move the needle in terms of viewership, ratings, things like that would be Oregon and Washington. So that does not surprise me at all. I can assure you the Big 12 will not do unequal revenue sharing. Texas tried to leverage that to stay. When it leaked, they were in talks with the SEC and it was shot down quickly. If we wouldn't do it for Texas and Oklahoma, we definitely won't do it for Oregon and Washington. Yeah, obviously you should have done it though. See, that's the issue. You should have done the unequal revenue sharing here. You can't lose Texas. You can't lose Oklahoma. Obviously now you're at a situation where Washington and Oregon joining the conference won't add enough revenue to make the unequal revenue sharing worthwhile. The other teams are going to make way less. Oregon and Washington, while they are worth more than probably any team currently in the Big 12, it's very marginal. It's not like this is Ohio State joining the Big 12 or anything like that. So, he's saying because we didn't do it for Texas and Oklahoma, two bigger programs, number one, they should have done it for Texas and Oklahoma. Their conference is extremely mediocre without Texas and Oklahoma now, but they didn't do it for them. There's no way they're going to go by this model for Washington and Oregon, which, if you're Washington and Oregon, I don't think there's much there. The only way you would join the Big 12 at this point is if there's unequal revenue sharing. Otherwise, you're just going to wait for the Big 10 and for the SEC to expand to 20 teams. At that point, you try and get in both of those conferences, and at that point, the Pac-12 is completely destroyed. And ESPN's lowballing them on their TV deal because they're just not an attractive entity. Apparently, ESPN wanted some late window games, 10 o'clock games for their, for their network. But they're not interested. The Pac-12 getting completely lowballed by ESPN. And we've got more bad news for the Pac-12. It says there may be some carriage issues with Pac-12 networks since the loss of the Los Angeles market will force that regional network to fold, which could trigger Comcast and others to drop carriage altogether until a new deal can be worked out. So what an absolute mess this is for the Pac-12 at this point. We're here. This is a horrible time to do negotiations. You've just lost two of your most valuable members, USC and UCLA, and you're on the verge of losing Oregon and Washington. And again, guys, what we're hearing right now, Arizona and Colorado very likely headed to the Big 12. That would put the Big 12 up to 14 teams. Whether or not they wanted to add Utah and Arizona State to that, they would actually slightly lose revenue if they added 4 more teams. So that's why they're talking about 2 more teams. There's some issue going on right now within the Arizona football program, which may cause Arizona to not be able to join the Big 12 in that event. We're hearing that it's going to be Utah that goes with Colorado to the Big 12, and apparently Colorado is just pissed off. They're completely upset with how this has been handled. They're not getting any information from any of the Pac-12 schools regarding negotiations, and the Pac-12 is on the verge of bankruptcy, folks. That's how bad this is getting with the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12, guys, when you think of, I'm just trying to understand, what is the Pac-12's future? If we get, which it looks like we're going to, if we get those two teams, let's just say for argument's sake, it's Colorado and Arizona going to the Big 12. Now you're down. You can try and poach, San Diego State and Fresno State. You're back up to 10 teams. It's a horrible league. There's no incentive for Oregon and Washington to stay in the Pac-12. Basically what I'm saying, if we get the super conferences of 20 teams, the Pac-12 is going to dissolve completely, in my opinion. How can it stay together? When you think about the situation, if we get a 20-team Big 10, a 20-team SEC, and then a 20-team Big 12, now the details with the Big 12 are a little bit murky because the ACC has that grant of rights deal, and this theory includes the ACC getting picked apart by the SEC. If they go to 20 teams, they're going to be taking teams from the ACC, and there's also the theory that Washington and Oregon could get into the SEC if the SEC wants to go fully across the United States and they want fertile ground on the West Coast, kind of like the Big Ten did with the state of California, USC, and UCLA. The Big Ten is in the position right now to wait. The SEC is waiting as well. I think if we're really going to expand, the next move, at least currently, now the SEC is unpredictable. Maybe they do something if those ACC teams can get out of their grant of rights. But the SEC has maintained, ever since the USC, UCLA announcement to the Big Ten, the SEC, everyone's wondering, will they counter? They're saying we're not doing anything. So I think the next move is Notre Dame to the Big Ten in 2025, Stanford to the Big Ten in 2025. So that's an 18-team conference now. The Big Ten then has the option to take both Oregon and Washington to get to 20 teams, or take Virginia and North Carolina, or North Carolina and Duke, whichever one they want. They get to 20 teams, and then the SEC, the floodgates could open if the grant of rights deal they get lawyers, whatever, they get out of it. I'm sure Clemson wants to get out of it. The teams in the ACC, the good teams, they hate the grant of rights deal, the media deal that the ACC currently has, and there's going to be a legal loophole once you start seeing the Big Ten rake in $100 million per year. Number one, I don't think every team in the Big Ten is going to be making that, because I think they're going to create unequal revenue sharing because it just makes sense. Now, I don't know their contract in specific, but the way the revenue sharing thing works, Ohio State's going to make a lot more money than Rutgers. It's not that Rutgers is going to make nothing, but logically it doesn't make sense for a program like Ohio State and Rutgers to make the same amount in their TV deal when the only reason the TV deal is so expensive is because those networks are paying, Fox Sports is paying for the rights to an Ohio State game. It's been measured, Ohio State has the biggest fan base in college football by far. So there's no logical scenario where Rutgers and Ohio State should, and it's not me, making fun of Rutgers. It's the same thing with Maryland, Northwestern, whatever, Illinois. They're going to create some sort of unequal revenue sharing. That was predicted by this source in an interview he did about a week ago or maybe a few days ago, whatever it was. So the next move, at least right now, because of that ACC deal, those teams can't get out. Really, the SEC can't do much. The only thing the SEC would be able to do that could kickstart all of this again is if they truly said, we don't care, we want teams on the West Coast, we're taking Washington and Oregon. And Washington and Oregon are really desperate right now to get into the SEC or the Big Ten. Now, does that make sense for the SEC to add Washington and Oregon? I don't know. They would have to think about that. They would get some sort of fertile ground in the Pacific Northwest, which I'm sure they would love to do. But right now, it looks like they're staying at 16 teams, and the next domino, if it's not the SEC saying, screw it, we're taking Washington and Oregon, because I'm sure Washington and Oregon, similarly to what Oklahoma and Texas are doing, they're asking the SEC to join the conference, right? So, because they would make way more money than their current position. Washington and Oregon are not in good positions. They have no leverage. They're in a bad conference with a horrible deal. Their conference is going bankrupt. It's going to dissolve if they leave it. Now, it seems like to me the thing that makes the most sense, the Pac-12 dissolves completely, and you've got because they were saying that, oh, in the event that the Pac-12 loses teams, they'll just eat the Mountain West. I'm not sure they can do that if the Big 12 makes a major move to expand. If the Big 12 goes up to 20 teams, they're taking Utah, Arizona. I don't know if it makes sense because it would really dilute things, but they would take Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, and then maybe a few other teams, and then teams like Washington State and Oregon State would be forced into the Mountain West. Or I guess you could just eat the Mountain West at that point. You'd basically be left with 3 teams maybe. It depends on what they want to do with California. Does California get a Big Ten offer? I would be shocked. I think the 4 most likely teams right now to the Big Ten, if they go the 20-team super conference, it's Notre Dame, it's Stanford, and then it's probably, well, you could also say Oregon and Washington. Especially Washington. The Big Ten likes Washington, not as much as Stanford, but they like Washington. Mainly the whole Stanford thing is to just get Notre Dame into the conference. That it would be kind of a lure for Notre Dame, adding another, the academic prestige of Stanford. But you could also go after Virginia and other teams in the ACC like a North Carolina or a Duke. If the Big Ten is adding teams from the ACC, I'm very confident it's either going to be Virginia, Duke, North Carolina. 2 of those 3 teams, some combination, something like that. If the SEC is adding teams from the ACC, it's going to be Clemson, it's going to be FSU, it's going to be teams like that, and then they also want North Carolina as well. So North Carolina would be wanted by both the Big Ten and the SEC due to their prestige, due to their basketball program, due to the revenue they generate, due to their brand overall. They're a very attractive program, they're a very valuable college program in that sense. So guys, right now the Pac-12 really putting themselves into a corner with these TV negotiations, how everything's working out. The big story we have today is that ESPN and the it looks like ESPN is calling the Pac-12's bluff, lowballing them, and then the Pac-12 saying, listen, we need a better deal than this. They're going to try and get a better deal from someone else. I don't know who will give them the deal at this point it's just a horrible time to negotiate when you're about to lose more teams right after you just lost USC and UCLA. So this is a horrible, horrible situation for the Pac-12. And guys, we will continue to update everyone on this, but that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.